Well, now we're going to transition to our next portion of the program, and it is a real treat. You're going to see about a half century of Travis County political history. It started with Senator Barrientos, and then he passed the baton to Elliott Naishtat, who is now going to pass the baton to Gina Hinojosa. So it is my honor to introduce a man that needs no introduction. He is a legend, and he always answers my phone calls. Senator Gonzalo Barrientos.
The word in Spanish for caution is cuidado. Distinguished elected officials, my fellow Democrats, it's customary for some of the guys and gals who have been to more than one rodeo to leave tips and valued information. So here you go. No filibuster. Just the facts, ma'am. Who said that? Been there, done that. To refresh some memories of people who have not. I was born in Galveston, Texas, grew up in Bastrop. First school I went to, there were 3 schools in Bastrop, one for blacks, one for Mexicans, and one for whites. I went to the Mexican school. I grew up picking cotton till the 11th grade. I think that we farm workers invented fast foods because they wouldn't serve us in the restaurant. We had to go around back, get a hamburger, and hit the road. Littlefield, Texas, 7 years old, mom, dad, myself, and my sister going into a cafe Saturday afternoon after working all week in the cotton fields. No Mexicans allowed, get out. So, been there, gone through that. In spite of that, we have made much progress in our country. As a community organizer for the National Urban League, Vista Peace Corps program officer, and all that background allowed me to serve you in the Texas House and Texas Senate. Thank you, my fellow Democrats. I won't do like Donald Trump. Now the caution, el cuidado. And you know, because of the media and the immigration issue, you would think that anyone with a little suntan named Sanchez, Perez, Trevino, or Barrientos just walked across the border a couple of years ago. Nay, not so. Spaniards and the indigenous is this blood, and it's an American blood. Who has been here for centuries or thousands of years before the beginning of our America. Caution, cuidado. In Central Texas, the Democratic coalition that we built in the 1970s, Chicanos, blacks, students, white progressives, labor, trial lawyers. There's some deterioration in that coalition. How? Why? Caution, cuidado. I might add, as another little cuidado, I've noticed in Democratic clubs, packing during endorsement meetings. Cuidado. Fact, it's been 40 years since we Democrats carried Texas for our Democratic president. Who was that? 40 years. Jimmy Carter. It's been 26 years since we elected a Democrat statewide. Why? How? Caution, cuidado. Interestingly, the good news that it's been 28 years since a Republican presidential candidate got a majority of women voters. Bad news, on the other hand, going back in history, 1968, George Wallace got over 500,000 votes in Texas. We must not let that happen again. Cuidado, caution. Bernieites, raise your hands. Who's for Bernie? God bless you. God bless Bernie. Hillary, raise your hands. God bless you. Cuidado, caution. No saquen las uñas against each other once this is over. Rather, saquen las uñas against racism, bigotry. As for that American, because El Trompo is an American, Trump, I have here a famous saying that you would like to hear, which reminds me of that man. Politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. We must work harder than ever before. The future is in our hands. Thank you. God bless you. Allow me a brief introduction to a great man, a great friend of mine. His name is Elliott Naishtat. A native New Yorker, he has lived in Texas for 45 years. He served as a Vista volunteer, and yes, I did send his nalgas to South Texas. He was elected in 1990. He's passed over 300 pieces of legislation. He'll probably tell you all about them. He's received hundreds of awards, AARP, Coalition for the Blind, Common Cause, etc. And in 2015, he received the President's Lifetime Achievement Award from the Corporation for National Community Service. And now, from New York, it's Elliott Naishtat live.
Thank you, Senator. You are a good friend. You are a great, great public servant. You still are. So first, I want to tell you that I had a strange experience 2 Tuesdays ago on Election Day. I went to vote at Gillette Elementary School, where I always vote, and I said to myself, as I was walking in, for the first time in nearly 26 years, you're not going to be able to vote for yourself. It has been an honor and a privilege to represent the people of District 49 and people all over Austin and Travis County and sometimes even the whole state. 1 second. Did Senator Barrientos mention that I'm from New York City? He did? Well, I'm looking around right now and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. I see 13 people who have never heard the real story of how. So I thought I'd take a few minutes rather than review the bills that I passed and share that story with you. Most of you, if not all of you, were either born in Texas or came here by choice. I did not come to Texas by choice. When I finished college in the late 60s, I signed up for the Domestic Peace Corps, VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. And the people in Washington said, "We would love to have you serve as a frontline warrior in Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty." And they said, "Because you're from a big city, New York City, we'll send you to a VISTA project in a big city." And they promised me an assignment in San Francisco. But you know the government. They lied. And they sent me to Eagle Pass, Texas. This was not funny. We went through training for 6 weeks in San Antonio. And during 6 weeks of training, I said to myself, you can do this. You can do this for 6 weeks because then you're going to San Francisco. What did I know about Texas? Not much. Charles Whitman and the Tower, John F. Kennedy, cowboys and football. On the last day of training, after they tried to teach us how to be community organizers with a mandate to eliminate the paradox of poverty in the midst of plenty in this nation, on the last day of training, the director pointed to 6 of us, and we were all from the East Coast. And we had each been promised VISTA assignments in either San Francisco or Portland, Oregon. And the director pointed to us and said, "Oh, you 6, there's been a change in the plans. You're not going to the West Coast. Tomorrow morning, you'll be on a Trailways bus from San Antonio to Eagle Pass." And we thought he was joking. But he wasn't. The next morning, we were on a Trailways bus from San Antonio to Eagle Pass, Texas. And it felt like it took about 3 days. It took 6 or 7 hours. And the bus went down the interstate and then hooked right and south on Highway 57. And it went for hours and hours and hours and miles and miles. And none of us had ever seen that kind of South Texas scenery. Hardscrabble, desert, cactus, tumbleweed, shrubs. We didn't see any people driving down. We saw some armadillos and some javelinas and some roadrunners. And the bus just kept going and going and going. And finally, finally on the outskirts of something, the bus stopped, and all the people got off, except the new recruits, the Vista volunteers. So I went to the bus driver and said, "Excuse me, sir, we're supposed to be let off at the downtown Eagle Pass bus station." And he looked me in the eye and said, "You putting me on, boy?" That was the downtown Eagle Pass bus station. So the next morning, the director of the Winter Garden Tri-County Community Action Agency, serving Dimmitt, Zavala, and Maverick counties, she took us on a tour of Eagle Pass. It didn't take very long, but we ended up in a low-income neighborhood, a barrio. Now they're called colonias, seco mines, and seco means dry, no water, no plumbing. And there were about 30, maybe 40 houses in seco mines, and this was a very low-income neighborhood, but the houses were in relatively good condition and clean. Either right next to or behind every one of those houses was an outhouse, a real functioning outhouse. And I remember thinking to myself, well, you didn't join the Peace Corps. You're not in Togo, West Africa. You're not in El Salvador. You're in the United States of America. Outhouses. There are no outhouses in New York City, except maybe a few in Brooklyn. No, that's a joke. Some of you may have relatives in Brooklyn. But it came as a real shock, and we were supposed to eliminate poverty. So we tried to involve people through this concept of maximum feasible participation of the poor. We started neighborhood associations. We tried to get water for seco mines. That's what they wanted us to do. We started a Head Start program because that's what the people in the El Indio neighborhood wanted the Vistas to do. We always involved low-income people. The philosophy being, we serve for 1 year in Vista, and if we don't develop local leadership potential so that la gente, the people, can start their own programs, organize their own programs and run them, then we've dropped the ball. We worked on getting streets paved. I do want to mention, because he's a dear friend, that one day, it was in the summer and it was really hot. And we were working, some of the Vistas were helping out with community people in the Head Start program, the preschool. And there were about 40 or 50 kids in the backyard. And this car showed up that none of us had ever seen. It had government markings on it. And a man got out, all dressed up in a coat and tie, Hispanic man. We didn't know who he was. And he walked up to the gate, and he looked over the fence, and then he opened the gate, and he passed a whole bunch of the kids and walked up to me and started laughing out loud in my face. And it felt like it went on for 3 or 4 minutes. It probably lasted 30 or 40 seconds. He just kept laughing, and I was looking at him, and I said, "Sir, is there some problem? Can I help you?" And he looked at me. Oh, I was wearing my traditional Eagle Pass summer garb. Sandals, cutoffs, torn T-shirt. My hair was a little bit longer. And he looked at me, and he said, "Don't get mad, there's no problem." He said, I'm working for the War on Poverty for Vista out of the regional office in Austin. And he said, "I'm now responsible for all the Vista projects in South Texas and West Texas." And he said, "I had to come down to Eagle Pass, Texas to meet the guy from San Francisco who thought he was going, to meet the guy from New York City who thought he was going to San Francisco." And he put out his hand and said, "My name is Gonzalo Barrientos." I've known Gonzalo and his family for forever. He's been a mentor and a very good friend. So what did we do in Eagle Pass? Some of you may remember the New York Times front page story above the fold back then toward the end of the year. Poverty eliminated in Eagle Pass, Texas. I'm kidding. So let me fast forward, and after Vista, I worked with the War on Poverty. I trained Vista volunteers. I supervised Vista volunteers. I ended up in Austin, studied community organizing at the UT School of Social Work. Camille remembers that very well. I helped Gonzalo when he first ran for the House of Representatives. I taught at UT for a while, and then I went to law school here. And when I finished law school, it was right around the time that Representative Gonzalo Barrientos ended up in the Senate. And he called me and said, "Elliott, I'm in the Senate now, and you have all these degrees, and I trust you and respect you, and I need you to come to work for me as my staff attorney." He said, "I can pay you what we paid you when you were a Vista volunteer." But he said, "I can get you a parking place near the Capitol." So I did that for 2 sessions. It was so exciting to work with the senator. During that period, he was focused on dropout prevention, elder abuse, many of the issues that we tried to address during the heyday of the war on poverty. So one afternoon, we were sitting around Schultz's beer garden, and some of the people there said, "Elliott, you ought to run for the House." And I said, "I don't think so." And they said, "No, you've been chairman of the Community Development Commission and president of your neighborhood associations, and you helped organize the Austin Neighborhood Council. You have 2 degrees from UT. You've worked at the Capitol. You've worked for a state senator. You would be great." And I said, "Maybe I'd be great, but I would lose." "Why would you lose?" I said, "Okay, first of all, you're talking about running against a 3-term Republican incumbent. He's knocked off every Democrat. I'm from New York City, so he would accuse me of being a carpetbagger and an outside agitator." I said, "I'm a former Vista volunteer." He would accuse me of being a communist. I said, I'm Jewish. I don't think the right person. He's knocked off every Democrat who he's run against. Well, Senator Barrientos said, "You ought to think about it, because you'd be good. It would be tough, but you never know." He said 2 things, though, if you run. He said, "Don't talk about a state income tax. It's the kiss of death in Texas politics." And he said, "More importantly, never mention that you're from New York." New York City. So I decided to do it. All these consultants wanted me to pay them lots of money. And I thought, what would I be paying them to do? This was back in the day when it was just hard work, no social media, no polling. I said, I would pay them to organize my campaign, but what have I been doing since I set foot in Texas, community organizing? So I put together my own campaign organization. I'd done a lot of work with the Gray Panthers and AARP when I worked with the senator on elder abuse. I got a lot of volunteers, and we went door to door for months in North and Northwest Austin. Nobody had ever done that. It was hard, and I wanted to win, so I didn't call for a state income tax. But Donna Howard was talking about the $27 billion shortfall we had a few years ago. Back in 1990, it was a $4 billion shortfall. And most of you know that Texas ranks at the bottom of the ladder in every important category. of Health and Human Services spending. 47th, 48th, 49th. I would tell people on their porch, and then I would say, and we rank 52nd on per capita spending on alcohol and substance abuse. And people would say, how can we be 52nd? And I would say, because we're behind Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. I said, we need to generate $4 billion just to stay at the low level we're at, and everything ought to be on the table. Sometimes they would say income tax. I would say the only way that I would support an income tax would be if we link it to restructuring the tax system in this state so that the property tax either goes away or goes way down, and the sales tax either goes away or goes way down. I still feel that way today. I never mentioned that I was from New York City. So what do you think Bob, we'll call him Bob because that's his name. What do you think Bob was doing? Not much. He'd knocked off every Democrat. He had some of those big roadside signs with his name on it, and that was it. What we think happened is that probably in early October, his consultants, he had a lot of money and a lot of consultants. We think his consultants sat him down and said, Bob, there's no problem, there's nothing to worry about. This guy's an outside agitator from New York City. He's an ex-Vista volunteer communist, but he's working really hard. He's got all these people going door to door. No one's ever done that in that side of town. He's generating some interest, some excitement. He's picked up a few endorsements. Let's not blow this. Let's go up on TV, which they did with a commercial. I'm sure some of you saw it, a brilliant commercial based on the original Pace Picante sauce ad. So for those of you who don't know, there's a group of cowboys sitting around the campfire eating supper, probably on the outskirts of Eagle Pass, and, and the cook brings some other kind of picante sauce. And one of the cowboys looks at the bottle and holds it up, and opens the cap, and says, this ain't Pace Picante sauce. This stuff was made in New York City. Get a rope. So Bob's commercial, very predictable. It started out with the skyline of New York, and the voice said, New York City? Do you want a liberal social worker from New York City? Then the Pace Picante jar appeared on the screen with my photo superimposed over the logo, and they got a look-alike cowboy from the real ad, and he said, New York City, I'll bet he's for a state income tax. Income tax, get a rope. So I served through the wonderful, I won by 10 percentage points. And then I served through the wonderful Ann Richards era, and then the George Bush era, and then the Rick Perry era, and now the Greg Abbott era. And there are a couple of things I want to mention. One is that it has been an amazing roller coaster ride for me. And I don't have time to go into details, but during that ride there were many unexpected events. For example, I never would have expected to spend a week in glamorous Ardmore, Oklahoma. With 50 fellow Democrats, and in the process, shut down the Texas House and temporarily kill Tom DeLay's obnoxious congressional redistricting bill. I never would have expected to see the Capitol overflowing with orange-clad pro-choice advocates. supporting Wendy Davis during her remarkable 11-hour filibuster. I spent much of that time in the Senate chamber behind the brass rail, quietly cheering her on. And I never would have expected to dance a combination of the Jewish Hora and the Texas two-step with Governor Rick Perry and 5 Hasidic rabbis in his ornate reception room, holding hands and circling a table with a lit menorah in celebration of Hanukkah. You should have seen the governor's face. But seriously, in addressing issues that affect vulnerable and disadvantaged Texans, I sometimes succeeded and I sometimes didn't, but I never gave up and ultimately passed, my staff says, 331 bills, some of which were good. No, I'm kidding. They were all good. And this truly has been the greatest honor and privilege of my life to serve in the Texas legislature in this beautiful city that I love so much. And I leave with high hopes, knowing that my constituents will be in good hands. So please allow me to tell you a few things about State Representative-elect for District 49, Gina Hinojosa. She is smart, energetic, compassionate, diligent, politically astute, persistent, progressive, a fighter, an advocate, and, as they say in Brooklyn, ready to hit the concrete running. Gina's experience includes work with Austin Interfaith, the Equal Justice Center, Catholic Charities, and Texas Rural Legal Aid. More recently, she served as president of the AISD Board of Trustees. She's married to John DeLisi, and they have 2 young sons, Mateo and Pablo. Gina, are you close by?
Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Representative. You are, as usual, too kind. But before addressing that, I also want to thank Senator Barrientos for blazing a trail for so many of us and for your many years of service in serving our community so well. As usual, Elliott, you are too kind, but I'll take it. And I'll take it, Elliott Naishtat, because damn it, you are the biggest challenge to me winning the seat that you will leave behind. I tell you, I knocked on many doors during my campaign. And after I introduce myself and say I'm running to fill Elliott Naishtat's seat, about every other person who answered the door kind of take a step back, look me up and down, size me up, and say, well, you know, but Elliott's my friend. And I'd say, yeah, I know, Elliott's your friend. And it wasn't that people thought I was running to replace you. It's not that people were confused. It's that people had such faith in the integrity of your leadership for so long that it's very hard for them to imagine me or anyone else, for that matter, living up to the high expectations that you created.